Hey, y'all, my name's Jeff, and I'm a believer in recovery from drug addiction. I'll start by saying that I come from as normal a family as everybody else. So in other words, they're completely screwed up, you know. My father was an alcoholic who fought in Korea and Vietnam, and that presented problems of its own. When he drank, he was physically abusive to my mother, and he was mentally abusive to us kids. I have a brother and two sisters, but they're nothing at all like me. I grew up as a heavy kid who was picked on and scared, and at 13 years old, I smoked marijuana for the first time. I was finally accepted by some cool kids, so I started getting high regularly. I also got into boxing in high school and decided that I'd never be picked on again. Fighting and getting high became normal for me in my teenage years. So at 19, I joined the Army. Drinking and fighting were all I wanted to do when I wasn't at work. I was soon shot in the leg in a bar fight. This took me off my feet for quite a while. And as I recuperated, I again put on weight. At 5'8" and over 300 pounds, I didn't fit in with the other soldiers, but I had bought a motorcycle for cheap transportation to work and spent a lot of time at the biker bars. I soon realized that the motorcycle clubs accepted anybody, especially violent drug and alcohol abusers. Again, I found a place where I fit in. I was big, I was angry, I was violent. In the biker world, the meanest, nastiest guy in the bunch ran the show, so I worked at being that guy. I abused my wife, and I would get into bloody fights with my dad anytime we drank together. I was involved in drug dealing, stabbings, and shootings. It wasn't long before I became the president of the club. You know, I was in trouble in the Army constantly, so I soon went AWOL and ended up with a dishonorable discharge. And I spent the next 15 years as the leader of 2 different motorcycle clubs. In 1993, I met my second wife. She had a 6-month-old daughter. I fell in love with both of them. When my daughter was 4 years old, I decided I need to leave the motorcycle club because I don't want to die in some stupid bar fight, cause her to grow up without a dad. Unfortunately, I left the club, but I didn't leave the lifestyle. Alcohol, drugs, and violence. It's just who I was. So 1998, my wife finally had enough. She was done. So she filed for divorce. You know, I got worse. But the only thing that kept me from slipping off the deep end completely was a misplaced sense of responsibility to my daughter. You see, I thought I was a good dad, spending every other weekend with her. I took her to the bars with me, and at 6 years old, she was forced to experience violent behavior that would have been disturbing to most adults. I rode her around on my motorcycle when I was drunk. I can remember thinking how cute she was, carrying around an empty Jim Beam bottle and a cigarette, acting like daddy. Now, at this time in my life, I was a functioning addict. I owned a successful business. You know, I thought I was living the dream, right? Finally, Christmas of 2001, the first Christmas after my sister died, I tried crack cocaine, and I was instantly addicted. You know, I quickly went through all my savings, and I convinced my parents that my business was failing, that I needed financial help, and they thought they were helping me by loaning me money. Within another year, I caused them to go into a bankruptcy. I'd lost it all, including my daughter. One of my last memories of her as a little girl was buying me an 8-pack of cigarette lighters for my birthday. You know, I wasn't fooling anybody. It'll be 6 years before I saw her again. Now, at this point, I came back to North Carolina where my parents lived, and I continued to lie, steal, cheat, do anything else I needed to do to get high. I robbed drug dealers often, and soon there were a lot of people that wanted me dead. My parents convinced me to enter a rehab, and I did this to please them, but I was soon having drugs delivered to me in the rehab. It wasn't long before I was found out and I was kicked out. But again, I convinced my parents it wasn't the dope that had got me thrown out, but that I had just broken some rules. And again, they helped me get a place to live, a vehicle, some tools. I pawned the tools, I sold the furniture. And finally, at Christmas of that year, I snuck into my parents' house and I stole the $100 bills that my mother had intended as Christmas gifts for all the family members. And this wasn't discovered until Christmas morning when they all opened the empty envelopes. But when my mother realized what I'd done, she wanted nothing more to do with me. And she told me that she'd buy me a one-way ticket anywhere in the country, but she didn't want me in North Carolina any longer. You know, I'll never forget, she gave me a card to carry in my pocket with her contact information so she'd at least be notified when my body was found. Now, at this point, I was homeless in Miami, Florida, and I was robbing people to get high. I knew I would be dead or in prison soon. So after a month on the streets, I called my parents again, and I made a deal with them that if I would commit to a 1.5-year rehab program, they'd let me come back to North Carolina. Now, this was a Christian rehab. But man, I wasn't buying into any of that Jesus stuff. I was way too smart for that, you know. About 4 months into my stay, my old girlfriend called me and told me she'd inherited some money, and so she wanted me to come to Minnesota. So I left the rehab more than a year early. When I got to Minnesota, we decided to travel the country. And as we were traveling, we stopped in Nashville, Tennessee, and being the smart guy that I am, I came up with the idea of buying a bar. Now, let me give everybody here some good advice, man. Never leave the rehab and buy a bar. You know, booze, dope, prostitutes, gambling, violence, everything that I loved. And would all lead me down one of the darkest paths in my life. But you know, as I was surrounded by darkness, God literally brought a ray of light, and his name was Doc Ray. You know, the one thing I never expected to find in the bar was a preacher. Isaiah 59:1 says, surely the arm of the Lord is not too short to save, nor his ear too dull to hear. You know, Doc rode a motorcycle and he hung out at the biker bars. He was really careful not to force religion on us. He was just always there in times of crisis, offering prayer and friendship. Doc became a good friend of mine, although I wouldn't buy into any of his Jesus talk either. Now, within 6 months of buying the bar, I was back to smoking crack. I lost everything. For 2.5 years, I was homeless. I ate out of dumpsters. I slept under bridges and abandoned cars, and even in the crawl spaces under houses. I was in and out of jail. In 2006, I was arrested over 30 times. I stole cars. I robbed people. I wrote worthless checks. I shoplifted. And I was always able to lie to my father, talk him into sending me money behind my mother's back. I remember my mother telling me that she hoped one of us died soon, her or me. She just couldn't take it anymore. On March 1st of 2007, I'd been on a binge for days. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd ran out of dope. A lot of you guys know the insanity of it. You know, at 3 o'clock in the morning in a ragged, falling apart borrowed truck with expired tags, knowing there were warrants for my arrest, and driving with no license, I headed into one of the worst drug areas in town. And of course, I was pulled over and arrested that night. By the way, when I was arrested, I weighed 108 pounds. And I was covered with open sores due to staph infection. You can still see the white scars all over my face, neck, and arms. But you know what? Going to jail that morning, man, that was one of the best things ever happened to me in my life. You know, because of the nature of this charge, my father couldn't bond me out this time. You know, when I did finally get out, my dad had come to Nashville, Tennessee to help me again. I had nothing except the clothes I was wearing. My dad helped me get a vehicle, a place to live. You know, I was just waiting for him to leave so I could get high. I remember it. But then he did leave. Man, after he left, he hit me. I thought, what if next time he's not here? What if next time I get out of jail and he's done? You know, I had what we call in recovery a moment of clarity. I made a decision to quit getting high. Now I had to figure out how to do that, right? I now see that the first time my father didn't bond me out, I hit bottom. I often wonder how much sooner I might have had this moment of clarity if I weren't being enabled by my parents. You know, they thought they were keeping me from dying, and it was all done in love. They almost loved me to death. You know, as I made this decision to quit using, I tried to think of anybody I knew in Nashville, Tennessee that didn't get high. And the only person I could think of was that biker preacher guy, Doc Ray. So I looked up his number. I called him. He invited me to church. And, you know, I accepted still believing that church was just a weekly inconvenience where a bunch of holy people got together to talk about how good they were and how bad the rest of us were, right? But I knew I had to get around some different kind of people. So I showed up the next Sunday. You know, I was waiting for the judgment, but it never came. Those people were so nice to me. And so I decided to come back the following week. Now, the next week, you know, I had no idea what was in store for me. And it's hard to describe, but I can tell you on April 22nd, 2007, I had an encounter with Jesus Christ and my life was changed forever. Psalm 42, he lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and the muck. He set my feet on a rock and he gave me a firm place to stand. And, you know, here I have to mention how grateful I am to Doc Ray. You know, he made sure I got home safely when I was too drunk to stand. He picked me up from jail when I was released. He was my friend when I didn't know how to be anybody's friend. He loved on me when I was unlovable. And he prayed with me when I was hurting. Doc accepted me right where I was, flaws and all. Without judgment, without condemnation, without beating me over the head with the Bible. He was simply kind and caring. And I don't know that God could have used anybody else to get through to me. Now, within 3 weeks of my salvation, I attended a church dinner and I sat by a couple I'd never met, Jim and Deb, and I'll never forget them. And we began to talk. I told them a little bit about my story, wanting to meet some other Christians. And they told me about a ministry they went to on Friday nights at another church called Celebrate Recovery. Now, they invited me the following Friday, but I remember telling them how Jesus had delivered me from the dope and I didn't need a recovery program. I'm sure you've heard that before. But they convinced me that I'd be able to make some Christian friends there, and so I finally agreed to go. And I know you hear it all the time, but man, I was terrified to walk into that place that night. Me, the guy that robbed drug dealers at gunpoint. But you know what? Once inside, man, I was amazed. I remember how freeing it was to attend a share group and to be able to listen to others like me. I realized I wasn't alone in my struggle, and I was able to be honest about myself without shame or embarrassment. You know, I realized I didn't have to be perfect to be a Christian. The love, acceptance, and freedom I felt were beyond comparison. I can remember leaving every Friday night and thinking all week about just getting back to sober recovery the following Friday. Within 2 months of attending, I began working the Christ Center 12 steps, and I found a sponsor. I committed fully to the program. You know what? I realized that the Lord had delivered me from the dope. But man, there was so much more than to just stop getting high. The 12 steps took me through a healing process. They taught me how to live sober, how to handle this world as it is, not as I would have it, right? I did what my sponsor told me to do. I was accountable, I was honest, and I took correction well. I began to work the 12 steps and to apply the principles to my life on a daily basis. Wow, what a change in my life. Then Christmas of 2007, I've been sober for 8 months. And my mother wanted to see me for the first time in 4 years. After a short visit, my mother asked me to come back home to North Carolina, and I can't express my gratitude to God for giving me this time as a sober Christian with my parents, finally being the son he intended me to be all along. Shortly after moving back to North Carolina with a year of sobriety, I began attending a church in Fayetteville, and shortly after I met the senior pastor. He was excited about what I wanted to do, so I began seeking others to help me start Celebrate Recovery. You know, being a leader in this ministry is truly one of the things that God has called me to. I came to know my wife at Celebrate Recovery. My daughter showed up at our wedding, and I was able to hug her for the first time in 6 years. I've made friendships that I know will last a lifetime. I've had damaged relationships restored and repaired. I've seen changed lives. You know, you can read about it in the New Testament, or you can just come to Celebrate Recovery and see it for yourself, right? I've learned that it's not about me and the blessing that comes from doing for others. God has given me back my family. I was able to comfort my father daily during a long hospital stay, which ended with his death in September of 2009. I was also able to pray with him to receive Christ before he died. I enjoyed 8 years of sobriety, loving on my mother. She could count on me. I was there for her until she took her last breath. And I'll never forget the day she told me how proud she was of the man that I've become. My daughter, her mother died tragically while I was in my addiction. Now she has a father. God has restored our relationship. She's forgiven me. Now she even brags about me being her daddy. I have a beautiful Christian wife with a wonderful new family that love me. I have incredible friends. I own a business. And glory to God, I have a Harley Davidson. Glory to God, yes. Priorities. Keep your priorities in recovery. You know, God has used me in many ways over the last 10 years. And in 2008, I started Celebrate Recovery at Destiny Now, and I served as the ministry leader there for 7 years. In 2010, I came on board the Celebrate Recovery Southeastern team as a North Carolina state rep, and I still serve in that role. In 2011, I finished school and I was ordained as a pastor and served as the campus pastor of Destiny Now Ministries for 4 years. In 2015, I was blessed to join John Eklund in starting and co-leading Celebrate Recovery at Temple Church in Selma, North Carolina. You know, I've come to realize that my decision to accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior has changed not only my life, but the lives of my family and my friends so many other people. God has turned my mess into his message, and I've been blessed to be able to share my testimony all over the country in many different venues. In the fall of 2011, I entered a casting call contest for a role in the movie Home Run. So I won the contest and appear in the movie as the Little League umpire. And through that experience, God has opened a new door of ministry for me in the acting world. I've appeared in several other movies, TV shows, and commercials. See, God is using me as a witness, both in front of and behind the cameras. I gotta tell you, since accepting Christ, life is truly incredible, but it's not perfect, right? Right. April of 2013, my wife and I separated, you see, because we couldn't seem to get along. You see, we married soon after meeting, and it didn't take long for us to realize we weren't much alike. And although we had separated, we weren't ready to give up on our marriage. You see, we may not have made the right choice in getting married so soon, but now we decided we wanted to make that choice right. We sought help by the way of a Christian counselor. I gotta tell you, man, it took a lot more than prayer. It took work, it took determination, it took commitment. We just weren't willing to give up. But you know what? Then the miracle happened. We began to apply the principles of recovery to our marriage. That's right. Celebrate Recovery helped me to realize that I couldn't fix or blame Pamela. I could only work on my part, my character defects. You know, God did a work of healing and restoration in our marriage as we both began to take responsibility rather than blaming one another. Today, we still have some issues. We do, don't we, sweetheart? But we're learning to accept the things in each other that we cannot change and to change the things in ourselves that we can. Now, last year, after putting the biker lifestyle behind me for 9 years, associating that lifestyle with all my bad behavior, God told me that it's okay to be a biker as long as I do it for his glory. In July of last year, some of us Celebrate Recovery bikers started talking about starting a group. During the following weeks, I was able to help start the Broken Chains, bikers who have found hope and healing in Jesus Christ through the ministry of Celebrate Recovery, helping others to realize that change is possible. You know, I'm honored to serve as the national president, and in the last year, we've grown to include close to 300 members in 40 states and 2 foreign countries. You know, God is using my past and my passion for his glory. You see, I'm a hope dealer. I'm a motorcycle missionary. Since September of last year, I put 22,000 miles on my motorcycle, traveling the country, sharing the good news that change is possible. Genesis 50:20 says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. You see, I've been uniquely qualified, and God is using me to reach people that others might not be able to reach and to introduce them to the ministry of Celebrate Recovery. You know, I'm grateful to Jesus Christ for my salvation. And I'm grateful for Celebrate Recovery, which has given me the tools to deal with life on life's terms. 10 years later, and you can still find me at Celebrate Recovery every week because I still need to be there. You see, recovery is a decision followed by a process. Since I made the decision to quit using 10 years ago, I've gone through the illness and death of my father and my mother. I've gone through a marriage separation. I've dealt with despair, anger, and frustration, but I'm sober today. I'm sober today because of the process, and you know what? I'm gonna be okay, man, because I don't have to turn to drugs to deal with my problems anymore. I have all you guys, man. I have a forever family all over the world. And I get to meet Jesus in every hug, every smile, every encouraging word. Wow. You know what? Today I am living the dream.
Yes, sir. Amen.
One day at a time, right? 3,818 days ago, all I want to do is quit getting high. That's all I wanted to do was quit getting high. I could have never planned or dreamed what God has done in my life since. Psalm 3:3, you, O Lord, are a shield for me. You are my glory and the lifter of my head. You know what? If you're new to sober recovery, or if you've been in sober recovery for a while, man, I encourage you to stay involved or get involved in the process of recovery. Let God do a miracle in your life. Change is possible. Change is possible, I know, because it happened to me. You see, I used to be a hopeless dope addict, but now I'm a dopeless hope addict. Glory to God. Thank you guys for letting me share.